What's going on, everyone? Welcome into Falcons Today. Coming up on today's show, we're going to check out the top 15 free agent targets now that Raheem Morris has put together his staff, and we'll look at some guys that the Falcons might have a keen interest in come free agency. Before we get to that, quick reminder, we have a live show this upcoming Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. So if you have never been a part of a Chat Sports live show before, make sure to tune in. It's a ton of fun. We get to talk about the Falcons, and of course, we have a mailbag. So if you have any questions, you can ask and get on screen. So make sure to set your reminders right now, Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern. Now, let's get into the latest Falcons coaching news before we talk about free agents, because I do want to spend a little bit of time rehashing what has gone down over the last 72 hours. Because Raheem Morris has added Zac Robinson and Jimmy Lake to his coaching staff. They both follow him over from L.A., and the special teams coordinator, Marquise Williams, he is retained by Raheem Morris. He has been the special teams coordinator since 2021, and he survived the firing of Arthur Smith. But let's get to know Zac Robinson and Jimmy Lake a little bit better before we look at free agents, because we didn't really get a great opportunity to do that in yesterday's at-home video. So, background information on Robinson. He played quarterback at Oklahoma State. He was a 7th-round pick by the Patriots in 2010. He floated around some practice squads, but ultimately fizzled out as a player, and then joined the Rams coaching staff in 2019 as an assistant QB coach. He spent time as an assistant QB coach and some other minor roles on the offensive staff, but most notably this past season for LA, he was their pass game coordinator. Now, with Sean McVay in town, the Rams don't have an offensive coordinator really. Like, that's Sean McVay. So this is sort of his number 2, if you will. And this was a big get for Raheem Morris because a lot of teams were doing their homework and were interviewing Zac Robinson for their offensive coordinator position. Now let's talk about Jimmy Lake, though. So he was the Rams' assistant head coach in his lone season out in Los Angeles. Before that, he was Washington Football's head coach. Went 7-6. It was not a graceful period of Washington football. There were issues on and off the field. He got suspended because he shoved a player. He was fired shortly after. Go talk to a Washington friend. It was kind of a messy divorce, if you will. Now, Jimmy Lake's specialty is defensive backs. It's what he did at Washington before he got the DC role, which eventually led him to the head coaching role. In college at Eastern Washington, he played safety. His entire coaching career has been defensive backs. He has produced some great DBs. Kyler Gordon comes to mind. The Chiefs have an awesome DB in Trent McDuffie. So that is his forte, defensive backs, corners, and safeties. Now, to kind of wrap up the 2 major coordinator hires by Raheem Morris, my overall thoughts and takes are this. An offensive coordinator with 5 years of experience as an assistant coach and a DC with 1 year of NFL experience. To quote the great Tony Romo, I don't know, Jim. I don't know about these ones. I would have preferred to have seen Raheem Morris go out and get some more experienced staff members. Not just hire his buddies from LA. I mean, I don't want to diminish what Robinson and Lake have done, but they don't necessarily scream, we are ready to either be a play caller, and that's what it would be. That's what it's going to be for Zac Robinson, or lead the defense under Raheem Morris with 1 year of NFL experience. I'm not too in love with these 2 hires. I like the Zac Robinson one much more than the Jimmy Lake one because at least he's got some more NFL experience, but at the same time, Jimmy Lake has more football experience altogether, so they're not too far apart. So grade Raheem Morris's Falcons staff, A, B, C, D, or F. I do want to believe in Raheem Morris. I do think he's a very good candidate. I do think he can do a good job as a head coach, but I do believe that getting coordinator hires is super important in a head coach's early career, and it's been a long time since Morris was an NFL coach. So this almost feels like it's his first real crack at it because the last one was the interim, but that doesn't really count. He didn't get to pick the staff or the players, and the last one before that was the Buccaneers, and that was well over a decade ago at this point. So grade Raheem Morris' staff A, B, C, D, or F. I would give it a B. Now, let's get into the Falcons off season. Let's talk about some free agents because that's what everyone came here to do. So the Atlanta Falcons go into the 2024 NFL offseason with around $25.8 million in cap space. That ranks 14th in the NFL. Now, they do have a first, a second, a pair of thirds, a fourth, a fifth, and a sixth. And one of those thirds could even escalate to a second if the Jaguars re-sign Calvin Ridley. But they do have some key free agents they do have to find a way to replace, and they overall have to make improvements across the board, right? Calais Campbell's a free agent. Not so sure about him coming back, especially at his age. Jeff Okudah, I'm not too optimistic, but I wouldn't say it's a 0% chance. Bud Dupree, that one doesn't seem very likely. Matt Collins, he was benched more or less towards the end of the season. Cordero Patterson doesn't seem too likely as well. So the Falcons are going to have to replace some of these guys, but ultimately, they're not losing superstars, right? I think you can all agree that maybe Matt Collins and Bud Dupree and Cordero Patterson, for what they were providing at the end of the season, this might be addition by subtraction if you can improve and upgrade from these guys. So if you want to create some more cap space, though, because right now you sit at 14th, so you can make some moves, but you can't make big money moves. Well, here are 4 players you could release before June 1st to free up about $20 million in cap space. Taylor Heineke, cut him, you get $6.5 million in cap space. Jonnu Smith, cut him, $6.5 million. Lorenzo Carter, $3.7 million. Mike Hughes, $3 million. You cut all 4 of these players, we're looking at ballpark $20 million. You go from 25-ish to $45 million. Even if you only cut 3 out of these 4, right? We're still looking at somewhere between $15 to $20 million in extra cap money to spend. So with that extra money, or with at least their $25 million to spend if they don't make any of these moves, which seems very unlikely, the Falcons do have some roster holes to plug. Their biggest needs are quarterback, wide receiver, edge, and cornerback. I think those 4 needs really stand out, especially the quarterback position, because that is by far their biggest need. So with that, we're going to look at the top. I'm actually going to do 16 free agent targets because there's only one free agent quarterback I think is really worth looking at, and that is Kirk Cousins. So a recent report came out from a Minnesota Vikings beat reporter that Cousins may be seeking $90 million guaranteed over 2 years. I know everyone loves to associate Deshaun Watson with the fully guaranteed contract, but remember, Kirk was actually the first to do it when he went to the Vikings. Now, the Vikings reportedly, at least are rumored to not be interested in paying $90 million guaranteed over 2 years. We're talking $45 million a season. That would not reset the quarterback market, but that would move Kirk Cousins into the top 5, top 6, top 7 highest paid QBs. We recently had Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, and Joe Burrow all get to $50 million plus-ish. So Kirk Cousins wouldn't necessarily be in that tier, but he definitely would not be very far from that. Personally, if it really is $90 million guaranteed for Kirk Cousins, I'm passing. Not interested in paying a quarterback who is 35 years old, coming off an Achilles tear, 90 G's guaranteed. Every man's got a price, and that is just too big for me to swallow. That's what she said. So no, not happening. Not doing $90 million guaranteed over 2 years for Kirk Cousins. So now let's move on to the other needs we talked about, because quarterback, I think, will get solved either via trade with Justin Fields or in the draft with maybe someone like Jaden Daniels. But first, I do want to get your opinion on Kirk Cousins coming to Atlanta for maybe $90 million if he really gets his way. Would that be something you're interested in? Let me know in the comment section right now. Would you sign Kirk Cousins? S for sign, P for pass. I like Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins gets more hate than he probably deserves. He has shed that primetime bug the last 2 or 3 seasons, actually. But $90 million for 2 years, it's just not happening. What I don't want to see happen is the Falcons find themselves where the Colts were a few years ago, right? With Matt Ryan, and all of a sudden, it's not working out too well. He's old, and he's kind of lost his magic, and now we're stuck with $45 million guaranteed for 2025. I think Kirk Cousins can still play really good football, but I'm not willing to wager $90 million guaranteed on that. Now, let's talk about free agent wide receivers, because this is a big need for Atlanta, with Drake London being the only wide receiver under contract. Here are my 5 ranked wide receivers for the Falcons in 2024. Number 1 is T. Higgins. Number 2 is Michael Pittman. Number 3 is a familiar foe, Mike Evans. Number 4 is Marquise Brown. And number 5 is Darnell Mooney. Now, let's swing for the fences. The Falcons have plenty of money to spend, and if they can get a guy like T. Higgins, I would be jumping up and down if I were a Falcons fan. Like, T. Higgins for, I don't know, $18 million a season. I understand that this past year was not his best work, but he missed some time. Joe Burrow missed some time. Before that, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. And that is as a number 2 in the Bengals offense with Jamar Chase. T. Higgins comes down to Atlanta. He may very well push Drake London to be the number 1 wideout. Would anyone be surprised by that? And I love Drake London, but T. Higgins, I think, is really special. Another guy to watch for if T. Higgins is not available is Michael Pittman. Now, I am sure the Colts are going to do everything in their power to make sure Michael Pittman stays an Indianapolis Colt. But if he were to get a bigger offer elsewhere, you know the saying, money talks. I think the Colts are going to retain and hold on to Pittman, but it's the NFL offseason. Crazy things happen all the time. My fear, though, is that the Bengals are going to franchise tag and potentially trade T. Higgins. I've heard rumors of the Bengals maybe not going down that path, but are they really going to let T. Higgins just walk out the front door? No. Could they afford T. Higgins for what the Falcons or other teams could pay? No. So they franchise tag him. They at least hold on to him for another year. And if they don't want to hold on to him for another year, or if T. Higgins threatens to hold out because he doesn't want to be franchise tagged, well, they could do what the Raiders and the Packers did. A Devontae Adams tag and trade, and when he gets to his new team, he signs a new contract. And hopefully that does not happen because I'm sure the Bengals would want a first-round pick for T. Higgins, and Atlanta is not going to give up the 8th overall pick for T. Higgins. If they had the 26th overall pick, yeah, I would do that. But number 8, not happening. Now, before we get on to the other free agent targets Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris should be looking at, a quick shout-out to our sponsor today, Prize Picks. If you want to have some extra fun while watching the Super Bowl next Sunday, well, make sure you get started with Prize Picks today because Prize Picks is super user-friendly, easy withdrawals, and all you do is pick 2 to 6 players, choose more or less on their projected stats, and watch the winnings roll in. So let me give you an example, okay? For the Super Bowl, I'm taking the more on Patrick Mahomes' passing yards at 0.5. Call me crazy. I don't like store-bought pesto, and I think Patrick Mahomes can throw for 1 yard. I'm in. Isaiah Pacheco, half a receiving or rushing touchdown. Pacheco has a nose for the end zone. I like the more on that one. And finally, this one I'm a little unsure about. I like the more on Christian McCaffrey receiving yards at 35.5. 35.5 always sounds like a big number for a running back, but McCaffrey is so dynamic. So if you like my selections, please feel free to ride with me over at prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. Because I love you guys, I put that link in the comments and description of today's video. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Let's switch gears and let's talk about the free agent edge rushers because that is definitely a big need for Atlanta. And here are the top 5 guys in my rankings. Josh Allen from the Jags, the other Josh Allen, he is number 1. Brian Burns, another familiar foe, he is number 2. Jonathan Grenard, a breakout candidate this past season from the Houston Texans, 12.5 sacks. I got him at number 3. Danielle Hunter from the Minnesota Vikings, he had a fantastic start to the year and still ended the year on a high note. He comes in at number 4, mostly because of the age element. I hate to be ageist, sorry, Creed. And then number 5, I've got Leonard Floyd from the Buffalo Bills, former Georgia Bulldog, first-round pick by the Bears, Super Bowl champion with the Rams, and this past season with Buffalo. I just think the number 31 is going to maybe be a bit of a turnoff for Raheem Morris. But we'll talk more about that in a moment. So let's focus in on the top 2 guys because a lot of teams go into the offseason knowing we probably can't make big splash move. The Falcons have no reason to not make a big splash move in free agency. They could get nearly $50 million in cap space available if they make all those cuts we looked at earlier. And if it comes down to having Jonnu Smith or Josh Allen, I'm taking Josh Allen. So Josh Allen, Brian Burns have both been terrific pass rushers the last 2 years. I prefer Josh Allen. I think a really undervalued metric for edge rushers is pressures, right? Pressures might not necessarily result in a sack, but more often than not, it results in a failure of a play for an offense, right? Maybe the quarterback just chucks it out of bounds. and you go from 2nd and 10 to 3rd and 10. That might not go down as Josh Allen getting a sack on the quarterback, but going from 2nd and 10 to 3rd and 10 compared to 2nd and 10 to 3rd and 3, that's a big difference. I love looking at pressures, right? How often are these guys disrupting plays and ruining an offensive rhythm? And Josh Allen does that at an elite level. Now, let's say the Jags are determined to bring back Josh Allen. Very realistic possibility. Same goes for Carolina. Plan C might be Leonard Floyd because he does have that connection with Raheem Morris. I think Leonard Floyd is a really good edge rusher. He had 10.5 sacks this past season for Buffalo. He never really caught on in Chicago initially, but he really broke out with the Rams, helped them win a Super Bowl, so he has familiarity with Raheem Morris. Leonard Floyd might be a sneaky plan C, plan D to watch for if the top 2 or 3 edge rushers get off of the board for the Atlanta Falcons. Now, finally, let's talk about cornerback, because the Falcons may be looking to replace Jeff Okudah if they do not bring him back. Now, the biggest names on the street this offseason are Jalen Johnson from the Chicago Bears, L'Jarius Sneed from the Kansas City Chiefs. Let me just stop right now and say, very confident both those players will be re-signing with their current teams. Now you've got Kendall Fuller, Adoree Jackson, and Stephon Gilmore. Those 3 guys are older, later in their careers, and I could see another team maybe outpricing the Commanders, the Giants, or the Cowboys for their services. So, in order to talk about adding a corner, I do think the conversation should really begin with the Falcons already having a shutdown corner in A.J. Terrell, who is likely looking for a fat, P-H-A-T, fat with a P contract extension this offseason, and he wants to be in the top 10 highest paid corners. And he's got a fair reason to believe so. I mean, he's not a Jair Alexander or a Jalen Ramsey, Denzel Ward level corner, if I'm being honest with you guys. But I do think he's better than Carlton Davis and J.C. Jackson. If Tre'Davious White was more available, he'd be in that neighborhood as well. He might even be ahead of Tre'Davious White because A.J. Terrell plays more football. So if I take a swing at what a contract extension looks like for A.J. Terrell, 4 years, $64 million, $16 million a season, that moves him in firmly to the top 10 highest paid cornerbacks in the National Football League, and you guarantee $45 million of it. But let's just say with the new head coaching staff coming in, Raheem Morris doesn't think A.J. Terrell is worthy of this big fat contract extension. So they want to let him play out, okay? Well, Kendall Fuller, he could be a name to watch for because Kendall Fuller is kind of right in that no man's land where he's not as good as Jalen Johnson and L'Jarius Sneed. He's not going to get as much money as they do. He's older, but he's still playing at a very high level. In his second stint with the Commanders, 79 tackles this past season, 2 interceptions. Pro Football Focus, if you like them in their rankings, they ranked him 7th out of 127 qualifying corners. So like I said, corner is a fluid spot because if they extend A.J. Terrell to a blockbuster deal and make him a top 5, top 10 highest paid corner, they probably can't afford to go pay Kendall Fuller what he's looking for in free agency, which isn't top 10 money, but it's probably around $10-ish million a season after the year he had. And I don't know if Atlanta's going to put all their resources into cornerbacks like that. So if they decide A.J. Terrell is not someone we think long-term should be in Atlanta, maybe they swing for a bigger name corner. If they do extend A.J. Terrell, well, maybe they decide to move cornerback down their priority list. That is a position to watch for as the offseason unfolds. Now, who do you want the Falcons to sign? We will wrap up today's video by getting everyone watching involved. Don't be afraid. Just scroll on down to the comment section and let me know who you would like to see Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris sign next month or 2 months from now when free agency gets underway.